I know. Global styles aren't going to be the most exciting thing that we get to talk about, but they are important and they will save us time. There's a few hints and tips in getting them set up properly, and that's what we're going to be looking at now. We are going to be, creating this for the actual project. So if you're going to follow along and build the website with me, you might want to open up Oxygen and copy what I'm doing here. And I will be referring to the XD file and showing you where we get those sorts of styles from the XD file. So go get Oxygen open and go get the XD file ready, and I'll see you in there. Let's get started. Welcome back to Oxygen. Hopefully you're getting a little bit more familiar with this layout. In this lesson, as you know, we're going to be setting up some global styles, and I will be jumping between XD and Oxygen, and I will be doing this quite quickly. Hopefully it's not too disorientating, because the way I do this is with a hotspot in the corner, like this, and I jump between the two programs that I have open. So I'm going to go back to Oxygen, and I'm going to get a couple of things set up before I start grabbing some of the things like colors from XD. So let's add a section, and in that section we want to add a heading, and this is a H1. So let's just call this heading 1, and then we'll duplicate this so we have 6 of these. So heading 2, we want to make this a H2, heading 3, H3, heading 4, a H4, heading 5, you guessed it, H5, and lastly H6. Now, I don't think the design has a H6, but we'll make one up just so we've got one styled, and because it makes sense with the global styles anyway. While we're here, I'm going to add in a normal text block, and I'll make that a paragraph. And I'll also add a text link just so we can see the link colors here. All right, we can save this actually, and then we're going to go to Global Styles, which is under Manage, Settings, and we've got Global Styles. Now there's a few things here. Editor settings relates to the editor itself. There's actually nothing that you really need to worry about in here at all. What we've got here is page settings and global styles. Now the difference between page settings and global styles is that page settings relates to the page itself. There's a few things in here like the page width, if you're going to have an overlay header, animate on scroll, JS scripts for example. But all of these things are in the global styles anyway. For example, you've got your width breakpoints and stuff like your scripts and animate on scroll. So why would you have these set up on page settings and not global styles? Well, there might be examples where you want to overwrite this with page settings. Maybe if you've got like a landing page, for example, but I think the best option is to stick with these global styles. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to set up some of these global styles, and we'll start with colors. So let's jump into XD and start getting some of these colors. So the easiest way to get these is to double click and I can get the name of that color. Or you can right click on these and go edit and then copy the actual hex code out of there. So I'm just going to do this the way that I'm comfortable with, which is just to double click and grab the color there. Now you can see in global styles, you can add other color sets, but there's already one set up called global colors. You might add another color set if you wanted to have a different set of colors for something else, like a landing page again. But most of the time, we're just going to have one set of global colors. So we'll go into that and we'll start adding some colors. I'll paste this color in here that I just copied from XD. And what I want to do is give this a generic name. Now this is a bit of a tip. It looks like you want to call this green, but really let's call this something like brand highlight. And the reason we do this is because if we add this color in here and then we start using this color, it will already show up as soon as we add this. So if we go to say something like background, and we can see the color here as the global color. Now let's say we wanted to change the design in some point in time and we'd called this green, for example. Now the good thing with global colors is that if you change them in here, it changes them everywhere on the website. But if we've called this green and then the brand changes or we reuse this design for another website, it's going to seem pretty strange to have it called green rather than something like brand highlight. So you can use whatever names you like. The main point is that you don't really want to be calling them by the colors itself. So let's grab this one here and we'll call this one brand base. Edit. This one we can call brand mid, and then we'll have a brand dark. Brand mid. I'll just do these quite quickly. Brand dark. Now, if we look at these next colors here, they're essentially grays and they're not really a part of the logo and the brand itself. So I'm just going to call them something like general or layout, anything that you want really. Layout dark. And I'll call this one layout mid. I'll call this one layout light. And then I am going to add a white, and I will call that white. The reason why I like to have a white is it just saves us time with selecting some of these colors. So if you have a look here, white, when I add white here, the white is showing up here as its own color. So any color that you're going to use continually in the design, you're best off setting up as a global color. So there you go. We've got the global color set up. Let's click save and we can move on to some of these other things in here. So we'll go back to fonts, and by default, you're going to have Source Sans Pro set up as your display, and then your text is going to be Open Sans. And so display is everything like your headings, and then you have your text, which is stuff like your text links and inside your buttons. Now anything can be overwritten when you select a heading, for example. You can select different styles here, and you'll see here that what it does is it shows you your display and your text, which are currently set up as Source Sans Pro and Open Sans, and we're going to change these now. So let's just leave that alone for a second, and we'll go and find out what fonts we've used. I'm pretty sure it's Hebo and Poppins. So let's have a look. Hebo for our headings and Poppins for our text. So let's go back. Now, by default, Oxygen connects to Google Fonts, and you can add essentially any Google font that is there. You can upload other fonts and connect to Typekit. With adding other fonts, you will need additional plugins to be able to do that. You can do it with free plugins, or there's a couple of paid ones which are amazing, and we'll look at that stuff later. But in this build, we're actually going to be using Google Fonts. So it was Hebo and it was Poppins. Now another good thing to look at here too is with the weights. Now by default it's going to try and load the ones in as you require them. But you can sort of specify the things that you want, and then it's not going to load other ones. So with this text, for my basic text in here, I'm probably not going to use a lot of other stuff. So what I'll do is just essentially add a regular font, an italic, and let's make something nice and bold here. And that can be our sort of standard fonts. If we need to add more, we can come back. Now we've got our fonts set up, we can hit save, and we can look at some of this other stuff like the headings. So the headings are essentially listed like we've got them set up here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the way that they work is essentially if you make a setting here, for example, like line height, on one of them, it will impact all of them underneath that. So if I make this line height here 1.4 or 1.6, it's going to impact all of those fonts. The same with the width. So if I make this one here, say 300, but then you can see that all of them are changed to a 300 font weight. Now if I go down to say H3 and change it to something bold, anything under H3 will pick up that bold font. So we're going to actually have to go back to XD again and look at the sizes that we're using. And I do know, and this is something funny, and this is my design decision. Yes, my fonts are very large, and that is how I work. I like to use bold colors and large fonts, but also I know that this is my H1 tag, and I'm doing this because of where it's positioned, and I've styled this how I want it to look, but I know that it's actually smaller than this H2 that's being used elsewhere in the design, which is strange. I know that's strange, and some people might not like that. But what we can do now is get these fonts here. We'll click edit, and it will show us the size. So we know that's 60, and I think that was bold. So we'll go to this with our H1, and it's 60, and bold, so something like 700. Now a H2, same thing. We'll look at this, and this is where it gets funny. Yes, I know that is large, so it's thin, and it's 90. So we'll add this in the H2, and we know that it's thin. So we're going to say 200. I think thin is actually 100. So there we go. We go to say the H3. Do the same thing for all of these. So this is 60 again, but it's in it's light. So we can delete this font weight here, and we know that that's 60. What do we have now? We've got the H4, which is 36. I might as well just have a look at some of these while I'm here. 36, 24. Okay. So our H4 is 36, 24, and we can make up one for our H6, which can be 21. All right, so you can see that these ones here have a little bit more of a normal hierarchy going from something large to small. I might change this line height on this large one to say 1.4. But yes, I am aware that it's a little strange to have your heading 1 slightly smaller than your heading 2, but that heading 1 is going to be used in the inner part of the design. Now you will notice here as well that I haven't used set colors. I haven't specified my colors for headings and stuff here, and you can do that. You can actually give these defined colors of whatever you want. But the reason why I haven't done that is because there's better ways to actually style the colors. You can do that with classes, but another thing that's really handy is when you select something like a div or a container, like a section that we've got, you can actually control the colors of the fonts without needing to select them individually. So rather than selecting this one and then saying I want this to be blue and then selecting them all to be blue, which is quite painful. Let's get rid of these colors. We can say select the background for a section and then change the text. So that can be an easier way to control the colors of your text. So rather, if we had let's just duplicate this for a second. We'll duplicate that. So if we had a section underneath that with different colors, for example, make that a light one. You wouldn't want to individually go to all of these to be able to change the colors, when you can simply change that global style here to something like that blue. So it's a much quicker way of working. And then if you needed to select one font, for example, to be a certain color, you can do them individually. So that's a long way of explaining why I don't put the colors in the headings by default. So let's keep going with these global styles. We'll come back here. We're finished with these headings. So let's click save. We've got a couple more things to do here. So the body text is actually fine, but the font size and the font weight is totally fine. The next thing we want to change here is some of this links. So we've got the normal color for all, and I might change this, and that's just so that it changes this default link. I don't like that having a default color, and we can leave these other ones as standard because you can just change them in that normal. But that one here where it says all, this is a good opportunity to change that so we don't end up with that default oxygen color or default website link color. I don't need this one to have that color on there. So that's the links set up. We can have a quick look at the widths and the breakpoints. Now we're going to leave these as standard, but if you do want to change these, you can change these to any size that you want. Sometimes I will make this page width slightly larger, like 1200 pixels, depends on the design, but we're going to leave this as standard for this one. Same with sections and columns. So you can see here that I've got this section and it's by default got some padding up the top. You could change that to say 50 for example, or 150. But for this, I'm going to leave this one as standard as well. So 75, 20, 20 is the standard for its container padding and for column padding. So we'll just leave this stuff as standard, but that's where it is if you need to change these globally. Now something like animate on scroll, you don't need to set this up. Animation is something we're going to look at in a couple of lessons. And I tend to do this individually on individual elements, but you can set it up so that you have the same duration on everything, the same sort of easing, and the same sort of animation type, whether or not you want stuff to fade up or fade down or whatever. But that's not how I'm going to work through this. We're going to set these up individually and use animation kind of sparingly. Same with scripts. It does give us the ability to add a smooth scroll to hash links. And that's like when you have a back to top sort of link. So we might put something in like 500 just to give us a nice smooth speed. If you wanted to jump around from, the footer to the header and you click the link, you can make it happen with this smooth scrolling effect, which we'll look at later. So let's click save. And now we've got essentially all of our global styles set up for us to keep working. Ooh, global styles. Tick. That is a good one to learn and to have off of the list. Now in the next lesson, we're going to start playing around with layout and how to actually format some of this stuff. So let's not waste any more time. Click complete and I'll see you in the next lesson.